I'm Jerome Pesenti. I'm CEO at Benevolent.ai. We're a company that uses AI to accelerate scientific discovery. In particular, we're trying to put new treatment through clinical trials. I've been in AI for the past 20 years. I did some research at Carnegie Mellon. I started an AI company before it was a trend in the year 2000. I sold it to IBM. I led R&D for Watson platform, and now I'm in another startup. My specialty is I've been trying to do things with AI for the past 20 years, build things, real things that work in the real world. Now, AI has a lot of buzz, a lot of hype around it, a lot of noise, and what I'd like to do today, I have 13 minutes to give you kind of a balanced view as to what's possible with AI, what are the problems, and what can you expect will happen in the next 5 to 10 years. Now, I'm not going to talk about the ethical issues. I'm going to focus more on the applications of AI, which is my specialty. Let me start with some misconception. Let's get it out of the way, okay? AI is not going to take over the world anytime soon. And if you hear people with this doomsday scenario, just look at that robot, and you'll know that they don't know what they're talking about, okay? If you ask anybody who has any kind of practice in that field, they know that we are not yet there, and AI is fairly limited at the moment, okay? So no doomsday scenario, don't worry, we're all safe, okay? Now the flip side is AI all hype? Well, my view is it's not. And the reason is that there has been a lot of progress in the past 5 years. Let me give you two interesting examples. Okay? The first one is CAPTCHA. I'm sure you know the little CAPTCHA, these annoying little puzzles that the website used to put in front of you to test if you were a human or a machine. Okay? Well, Google actually bought a company called reCAPTCHA 8 years ago because it was a big trend at the time. Okay? But just a couple of years ago, Google researchers also developed a system that's able actually to break CAPTCHA better than human. So now, according to the machine, machines are more humans than humans, okay? So interesting development there. The second one, which is very impressive to me, is face recognition, right? I've been in that field for 20 years. I would say 7 or 8 years ago, you had asked me how long till we'll be able to solve face recognition. I would have told you maybe 20, 30 years, Well, it's almost a solved problem now. Facebook has created a system that with enough pictures can actually recognize your friends better than you. So AI is not all hype, and these results are quite impressive, and they have happened in the past 5 years. Now, does it mean that AI is going to take over all our jobs? Well, I don't believe so. The challenge is AI is very limited to some narrow task, okay? And take a thing like dialogue. Dialogue actually is much more complicated than we imagine. So last year, a big hype was chatbots. Actually, my team at Watson was developing them as well. I believe chatbots have a future, and they can do some things, but it's actually extremely complicated to do a chatbot that can really dialogue with people for a long time, okay? When I was at Watson, I remember one of the sales reps said, he was trying to sell, and he told our clients, Watson is better, they're your best customer rep out there. And that's not at all true, okay? Watson is not as good as a customer rep. There's no AI that can do that. It's not even better than an average rep, but it can do some things. Now, the reason AI can do things is because we have a notion that, okay, humans always know better, but there are many, many cases where actually human knowledge is fairly limited, okay, and humans don't always know better. One of the challenges I've found in the past 20 years is get companies to evaluate actually how their experts and their humans, their employees actually do on certain tasks. And what I found is there's a lot of reluctance for people to actually measure how well they're doing. I was actually working with an agency for unemployment, and if you recognize my accent, you can figure out the country. And one of the things we're trying to say, okay, if you want a computer to assist your people in making recommendations for new jobs, we need to figure out how good their recommendations are today. And what I was told is, no, we can't measure that. We can't measure how well people are doing. That's completely taboo. It won't fly. So the problem is, humans don't always know better, and it's really important to actually measure their performance. And you'll see that when you measure performance of humans, they don't do as well as you imagine. And this is one of the key problems with AI, is that it's not just about technology, it's also about adoption. Adoption is about culture. We may have systems that can do great diagnostic today. We may have systems that can help you invest. It's not said that the expert in the field actually will accept using them. Let me tell you a little bit about some issues about applying AI. The first really key issue is it's hard to find good applications for AI. And the reason it's hard to find it is because the people who have deep knowledge of AI usually don't know much about potential domain of application. And the people who know very well about domain applications are not really expert in knowing what AI can and cannot do. And it's very difficult for them to figure out the noise from their reality. One reason it's hard for them to figure out the noise is that it's quite easy to fake AI. So let me give you actually a little hint on how to react when you see people talk about AI technology. My rule is, if I can't try a system myself, okay, I won't know how well it performs. AI is all about open interaction with the system, not scripted demo. So if you see someone on stage that just gives you a scripted demo, you have actually no view if it's actually reality or it's just something that works well in this particular case, okay? Because one of the problems actually with AI is to figure out how well a system performs in the real world. Let me give you a little anecdote. I was talking with a researcher from Google and their speech team, and he was telling me that more than 70% of the papers they tried to implement in their speech system didn't lead to any improvement, contrary to what the benchmark was saying, okay? So one of the problems, actually, even if you're talking about some of the best paper out there, written by the best research scientists out there, yet they have no results when put in practice. One of the challenges is when you go in the real world, the data and the interaction are quite different, and it's a lot of unknown compared to what you train the system on. Because one of the key problems of AI system and machine learning is that they tend to do what's called overfit. You give them some data to train them, but the system actually is supposed to generalize that training data, understand the broader world, not just the data you give it. But what you found is that in practice, many systems actually overfit to the training data. They look at a narrow area that you give it to them, like a benchmark that people have written a paper, but actually when you put it in the real world, it falls on its face. One of the stories I had at Watson is, in the early days, we went to see a company to create a system, an agent, and we asked the expert to give us a lot of questions. They gave us actually 2,000 questions to create a system that could answer any question out there. And we created an agent able to answer this question, and our accuracy was 75, 80%. Okay? Then we took the system and we put it in front of real users, and our performance was dismal, 10%. Okay? And what happened is not that the system wasn't working, is that the expert actually had no idea what the questions of people were actually asking. The experts were giving us questions with 15 words, 20 words, when the people in practice asked very simple questions and very difficult questions to actually answer because they were very short. Okay? So the problem is, really, you need to put your systems in production. When you look at AI, the advice I would give to anybody trying to apply AI is go out there, put it in front of a real system, and try to create a system that learns from that. Not the standard supervised learning where you give it some training data, you learn it, and then you throw it out there over the fence for it to practice in the real world. But to get a system that you put in the real world very quickly, that learns from it, that does things like active learning, online learning, and that's a little bit smarter about learning from the data you can collect through interactions. Now, enough maybe with the warnings and limitation. What are the things I believe will actually change the world in the next 5 to 10 years? The first one, I really think that AI is changing now, is the way we interact with computers. Now, I'm sure all of you have learned to type, and we're all using this really silly keyboard. It's called QWERTY, which, if you know the story of it, it was developed to slow you down. It was actually a keyboard made to slow you down so you wouldn't jam a typewriter. It's the worst user interface you could imagine. And the history of human-computer interaction in the past 10, 15 years has really been around that example, which is we are adapting to computers rather than computers adapting to us. But the nice thing with the progress in AI in the past 5 years is now we have computers that can understand natural interaction. If you have kids and you've seen it interact with an iPad or interact with Alexa, the product, it's quite remarkable to see them, how naturally now they can interact with the system. When 15, 20 years ago, it was very difficult for us to do that. Now, a 2-year-old, a 3-year-old can actually interact naturally with a computer. And I believe we're not yet at Minority Report, like on that picture here, but we're making great progress toward a much more natural interaction with computer. A second field where I think AI will make a huge difference is decision making. Now, humans, are good at understanding complex problems, but they're not actually very good at processing a lot of data. And what we've found in the past 20, 30 years is that it's much better to make data in an informed way and assimilate as much data to make decisions in an informed way. And it's much better to actually assimilate as much data as possible. And this is where computers are very good. They're not as smart as us, but they can actually assimilate a lot of data and help you make a decision. And I believe that that is for diagnosis or for making trading decision or deciding if a drug is good or not. computers can really help us making this kind of decision today. Now, the third piece where I'm really excited about computers is that, as I mentioned to you, computers are not very smart today. The AI is not quite that there. And it means actually you can take on some tasks that are not the smartest tasks out there. I don't believe they're going to replace us for everything. But I believe actually that they will replace us for the most mundane tasks. Think of the customer support rep that I mentioned before, right? If someone is interacting with you, what a computer can do today when you're asking a question, it can answer actually the most basic question. And I believe it would be great to create a system that can filter out the most common question that you have to answer, so you don't have to keep repeating yourself, so that you can focus as a human to the most difficult question. And I believe that's the model for AI. AI will take on the most mundane, the most repetitive mental task, and leave to human the most interesting task out there, so that we can all do more interesting jobs. And one of these jobs, that will become, in my opinion, less tedious is actually programming itself. If you understand a little bit about machine learning, what's interesting is when you use machine learning, you actually code to an objective. You don't actually tell the system traditionally, like you will do in normal coding, what to do procedurally. You don't tell it step by step what to do. You say, this is what I expect. This is the kind of behavior I want you to get to. And you don't have the tedious task of telling the system how to get there. You just tell it how to, what goal you want to achieve. And I believe that would really change the way code system and the way programmers go about solving a task. Tell the system what your objectives are, rather than telling the system how to do every single step. Now, the last thing that I think the computer can change, and that may not sound like the most obvious, but this is what my company is doing today, okay? We're actually using computers to give ideas to scientists. And if you think about how ideas come up, it's very ad hoc today. The scientific discovery actually is very ad hoc. People basically read a lot of papers and kind of build a mental model of what's going on out there. And one day, eureka, a new idea come up for a new treatment for cancer or glioblastoma or heart disease. I believe there is a much better way to do that. You can create systems today and computers that can go, as I mentioned earlier, process all the relevant information out there. Computers are very good out there, and you can create AI systems that can process papers and patents and clinical trials and all the relevant data out there to make a discovery. And instead of having a scientist basically come up with ideas, we have actually created a system that can take a goal, like solving a disease or creating a new molecule with good properties, and come up with new ideas for the scientists. It will present to them the ideas, and the scientist there is not about, their goal is not to actually come up with the ideas, but is to actually validate them. And as they validate these ideas, they actually give some feedback to the system, so the next time around, our system can actually generate better ideas. So here it is, don't be afraid of AI. It's not going to take over the world tomorrow, but it's not all hype. There are real things that are happening right now. They're not so easy to find. Actually, people need to really investigate where is a sweet spot for AI out there. And I believe that the sweet spot is in this user interaction. It's in computer processing a lot of information to help us actually make decisions and come up with new discovery. Thank you.